Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here tonight to talk a little bit about what we do and what we're currently concerned about in the Highlands.
Yeah.
And I didn't intend this as a primer to the Highlands Act and the Highlands Regional Master Plan, because I figured after 14, how many years since the Highlands Act was passed, even though it is a very confusing piece of legislation that not many people understand in its entirety. It's people know enough about it that what it's intended to do, and it's about time we judge whether it's come through on its promise. So let's talk about the legislative intent of the Highlands Act. And I never intended to read a paragraph while doing a presentation, but this is very poetically describes the justification for the Highlands Act and why the legislature enacted this extraordinary intervention over municipal control over their land. So I will read this. It is in the opening findings section of the Highlands Act. The legislature further finds and declares that the protection of the New Jersey Highlands, because of its vital link to the future of the state's drinking water supplies and other key natural resources, is an issue of state level importance that cannot be left to the uncoordinated land use decisions of 88 municipalities, 7 counties, and a myriad of private landowners. That's quite an indictment. That the state should take action to delineate within the New Jersey Highlands a preservation area of exceptional natural resource value that includes watershed protection and other environmentally sensitive lands where stringent protection policies should be implemented. That a regional approach to land use planning in the preservation area should be established to replace the existing uncoordinated system. That such a new regional approach to land use planning should be complemented by increased standards, more protective of the environment established by the Department of Environmental Protection for development in the preservation area of the Highlands. That the new regional planning approach and the more stringent environmental standards should be accompanied as a matter of wise public policy and fairness to property owners, and by a strong and significant commitment by the state to fund the acquisition of exceptional natural resource value lands, as this happened. And unfortunately, the ball has been dropped just because of the way the legislature's blamed the uncoordinated land use decisions of 88 municipalities. I'd say the uncoordinated attempts at power by different state agencies and levels of government has created a great deal of confusion and has prevented the Highlands Council from fulfilling its role as much as it really wants to. Fortunately, now there's an executive director who is really trying to fight to get these these mandates of the Highlands Act done properly. First we see, well, let me talk about home rules for a moment, because I think there's a great misunderstanding in New Jersey about home rule. And that's where the legislature questions this attempt to protect the high value natural resources of the Highlands, which are of a state level importance, cannot be left to the uncoordinated land use decisions of the 88 municipalities, 7 counties, and a myriad of private landowners. Well, how many times have we heard that the Highlands Act was unconstitutional because it takes home rule away? We are a home rule state. Well, can someone name for me where it is home rule? Someone has a state level authority has decided that home rule is sacred and that municipalities have that power. People say it's a home rule state, but what does that mean?
It's tradition.
At best, it's tradition, but most people believe it's a lot more than that, and it isn't. Because the New Jersey Constitution provides that the legislature may enact general laws under which municipalities, not counties, may adopt zoning ordinances limiting and restricting specific districts and regulating therein buildings and structures according to their construction and the nature and extent of their use and the nature and extent of the use of land. And the exercise of such authority shall be deemed within the police power of the state. Such laws shall be subject to repeal or alteration by the legislature. The police power to regulate land use is in the state. They limit, in a limited fashion, they give delegate some of those powers to municipalities, not counties, but municipalities through the state statute of the municipal land use law. And these can be subject to repeal or alteration by the legislature at any time. And that's what the Highlands Act was. That's why I call it a great intervention. And that's why it was so painful to municipalities and landowners who thought they were protected by their municipal zoning powers. But the Highlands Act did, in the second quote here of the Act, the Highlands Act should be accompanied as a matter of wise public policy and fairness to property owners. There was a promise of returning that equity to landowners. Now, some landowners just wanted a monthly check doing nothing because of the loss of value of their primarily farmland. But the state wouldn't do that. What they agreed to do was purchase your land or your development rights and look at a dual appraisal. An appraisal at the current value of the land given current regulations, and another appraisal as if the Highlands Act wasn't in effect. And you could use the hire as a negotiation. Nobody else gets that in the country. So it does attempt to address the equity issue. The problem is that the Highlands Council gets no money from the state to implement a TDR program. They get some money from, well, they used to get money from the federal Highlands Conservation Act. I think it was $5 million a year, which isn't a lot of money. But it was anticipated that Green Acres program, now that we have a stable source of funding too, that's constitutionally mandated, that it would go to the Highlands, and a large part of it does. But the Highlands Council has specific needs to fulfill the mandates of the Act, which Green Acres is not obliged to, nor are they concerned with. I mean, there are about 19,000 acres of land in the Highlands right now, in the Highlands Preservation Area, that could be developed by exercising single-family home exemptions. And the Highlands Council wants to buy those properties, but they're too small to satisfy or to rank highly for Green Acres. So the Highlands Council has requested that they get a portion of the corporate business tax, which currently funds all open space, farmland preservation and historic preservation, that they want a piece of it. So they can purchase lands that Green Acres wouldn't, but would satisfy the requirements of the Highlands Act and help satisfy the equity provisions of the Highlands Act, which were never satisfied and continues to dog the act today. And the people who objected, there's still a lot of anger and resentment because the Highlands Council was never able to make good. And there is so much resistance by Green Acres to cede some of this money to the Highlands Council that we wonder if it could ever happen. And this is despite the fact that as of today, Green Acres, the SAD and the SADC have a surplus of $1.1 billion, money that has not yet been spent. And they can't spend it. It's way too much money they could spend. So to add.
What was that, the SABC?
SAD, the State Agricultural Development Council for the purchase of the who implemented the farmland preservation program. So and with this $1.1 billion, if they don't figure out a way to spend it, it's going to get taken away from them. So that's one way where the Highlands Act has not been able to live up to its potential. And so that's how property owners are not fairly compensated or don't get the compensation for their land.
You mind if I ask questions now?
Yeah.
Is that the only way of them to get compensated through the governmental grant or a buyout like that through the SADC or the Highlands Council grants?
No one has suggested a better way. I mean, there could be an implementation of a water tax, but that's never gotten anywhere.
Yeah.
But what I would never advocate is that a landowner just gets a check for their lost values. Because, you know, it's really their lost speculative values. Because if every landowner who wanted to develop couldn't, there'd be way too many houses and there'd be no market for all those houses. So, I mean, do you have a suggestion?
No, I'm just, I'm on the County Open Space Trust Fund Committee, so we look at the purchasing open space acquisitions and we're always looking at pre-Highlands assessment versus a current assessment post-Highlands and often paying at pre-Highlands assessment values, so doing kind of what you're saying.
Right.
But few and far between, you know, I mean, I assume what we at the county level do is just whatever open space we've done, it's yeoman's work, but it's not making everyone whole or coming close.
I wonder, you know, no one's really suggested that the Highlands counties work with the Highlands Council to distribute equitably in light of landowner equity, some of these open space dollars. And I was on the county open space committee a couple of years ago for a couple of years representing my region. And we had a hard time spending all that we had.
And so do we.
Yeah, and rather than the county decide to lower the levy, maybe a good investment would be working with the council to help purchase lands for this purchase. Something I would discuss with Ben. So other significant issues, in many ways, there were a lot of problems that Governor Murphy inherited from the Christie administration and has done very little to correct, which makes me wonder if we're still in the 16th year of the Christie administration. Well, Christie was no fan of the Highlands Act and really not a fan of planning at all. He pulled apart the state redevelopment plan and never proposed one. So we sat without one for 8 years. Fortunately, now they're about to adopt a very good, I think, a very good state plan. So what Christie did, he removed the Highlands Council from WQMP amendment process for the planning area. When the Highlands Council under Corzo, when there was a proposed amendment to water quality management plan, whether it was regardless if it was in the planning area or the preservation area, it required a consistency determination from the Highlands Council. And there was there was a judge at the time who called that backdoor conformance in the planning area because it applied regardless of the conformance status of a municipality. And at the time, the thought was that, yes, conformance in the planning area is voluntary. It's up to the municipality whether or not they want to conform their land use ordinances to the regional master plan. But on the state level, state agencies would have to be guided by the regional master plan as interpreted by the Highlands Council. And what Christie managed to do was to tell non-conform planning area municipalities that they don't have to even consider themselves part of the Highlands region. And that never was the intent of the Highlands Act. So they removed the Highlands Council from the WQMP amendment process for the planning area and really any major permitting decisions. If you were in the planning area, you were just treated like the rest of the state. Christie, as we all know, dissolved COA, which ended up being taken over by the courts, who coerced planning area towns that coerced the judges in these settlement agreements not to consider Highlands RMPs in determining the numbers assigned to a municipality in the Highlands region. That was unfortunate too. And today, the round 4 numbers, the raw numbers assigned to the Highlands area, are greater than the carrying capacity of the region. That's a direct collision with the Highlands Act. It's round 4 program regulations. And this new bill, which I'm sure you've all heard about, S 4736, will even if you have filed with DCA, your housing element and fair share plan, good faith, with the numbers that were assigned to you. You didn't go for the vacant land adjustment, whatever. Still, your ability as a municipality to control your land use can be taken away from you by 4736. If it passes as it's written, it's as if you are subject to a builder's remedy lawsuit and you lost without even a judge declaring that, without even with being in compliance with the round 4 rules. This can be taken away from you. Fortunately, we've reached out to Senator Singleton and he's willing to talk with us. We slowed down the bill. It's not going to pass in lame duck. He's going to work on it with various groups in the next session. And that
supposed to be voting.
when? Well, it won't be in lame duck. He's I wouldn't say promised, but he's pretty much committed to that. You know, and as of now, there's no assembly sponsor. And it has not been introduced in the assembly yet. What Christie did, he realized he couldn't change the legislation on his own. He would need the majority of a Democratic legislature, which is unlikely, but he could appoint Highlands Council members who were equally antagonistic to the Highlands Act as he was. And he did that. And then he failure to appoint Highlands Council members. So by now, because Murphy has only, I think, appointed 1 or 2 in his term, right now a 15 council member, a full council is 15 members, they have 10. And every other month they have to cancel a meeting. Actually, they canceled the December meeting and the November meeting was canceled because they wouldn't have a quorum. And Judge Dressler, who was a member up until, well, he still was a member, passed away today. So there's gonna come a time when they're not gonna be able to have a meeting at all unless we have council members nominated and then appointed.
Well, why did Christie do that? Was he getting paybacks or something?
That was his political inclination. I mean, I'm sure he promised the developers this, but this is why that was his platform. He was pro-development and not what the Highlands Act and the RMP plan to do, is balanced growth. Environmental resources, protecting them, and growth, put them in balance, which is the harder work, but it can be done.
And are the current challenges under the Murphy administration just the difficulty of finding volunteers to sit on the old
I guess it's not a priority of his.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help with the tradition, another tradition we have in this state, senatorial courtesy. And that balance of power, understanding between the legislature and the governor provides that any nominee, any gubernatorial nominee that has that is meant to go through senatorial advised consent. Every senator whose district has at least one municipality in the county of the nominee has senatorial courtesy. And that means without giving a reason and indefinitely and ultimately, they can prevent that nomination from moving forward. So it used to be before the Supreme Court of New Jersey found at one point, legislative district was a county. And that ended up being found to be unconstitutional because a county like Cumberland, which is very sparsely populated, would have the same power as, say, Essex County. And there are 8 times as many people in Essex County. So they apportioned 40 equally sized in population districts. Some of those districts overlap several counties. So we have very strongly advocated that a woman by the name of Winifred Victor Himes from Newark be appointed to the council. And the governor nominated her. But being from Essex County, there were 6 senators who had to approve her. And the interesting thing was that the Republicans passed her with no problem. And Winnie is African American. She's a woman. There are no women on the council. There are no African Americans on the council, and there's no representation of the city of Newark, which has 5 reservoirs in the Highlands. That their interest in maintaining water quality very much aligns with the Highlands Act. But there were 2 senators who were African American who would complain that Murphy would never nominate an African American. Well, here they did, and they wouldn't let her move forward. It had nothing to do with Winnie. It had to do with the conflict between the Essex County Democratic Committee, the machine. So Winnie never moved forward. So it can't just blame the governor. You have to blame this senatorial courtesy, which is hugely unfair, but it's not a rule. It's not written down anywhere. So you can't sue. You have to get the council, the senators to agree to give up this power, and they'll never do that. So as I mentioned, the failure to appoint Highlands council members, that the council is just gonna have to cancel their meetings. And there's a lot of lack of cooperation with EEP to work with the Highlands council. And I'll talk about that. Well, the Highlands Council has has proposed forest management DMPs for the Highlands that they want to adopt into as a amendment to the regional master plan. And they're really very good. Because they are geared towards stewarding our forests to maximize water resource protection. And DEP's forestry, which has been determined by the Division of Fish and Wildlife, like to see our forests turn into game farms. They want plenty of deer, which is to help the hunters. And they like to, clear cut 10 acres at a time to create habitat for a couple of songbirds. Meanwhile, not looking at the impact to other endangered species of our forests. And they really don't give much concern about water resource protection. So the Highlands Council has this best management practice, which was done in consultation with what they're doing in the Adirondacks, what they're doing in the Catskills, and in other states. It's really quite good. But the DEP commissioner intercepted it and said, we want to read this and we want to comment on it because we share jurisdiction in the Highlands. So Highlands Council gave it to them, and the DEP was going to comment and return it to the Highlands Council. That was over 2 years ago. And so they haven't been able to move forward on that. And this happens all the time between the two agencies. Staffing levels at the Highlands Council has since their budget has been slashed, they can't hire enough people to really fulfill their mission. And that we'll talk about right here. Because there's a lot of comparisons between New Jersey Highlands region and what New York City does in the Catskills to maintain a water supply for 9 million people. The Highlands Council maintains a water supply for 6 million people. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, it's a little higher in these metrics here for the Catskills, but not by far. They're very similar agencies. But we see, let's compare the two investments in the Catskill watershed, or rather the Delaware River headwaters region, the Catskill watershed. They have New York City, I think the DEC, which manages this watershed. They have forestry best management practices for water quality protection. They have cost sharing program for stewardship of private forests. So they'll get some money to do the right for best management practice, to implement best management practices. They fund open space acquisition, specifically for water resource protection, private landowners. They have a filtration avoidance program, so you don't have to they don't have to clean up the water when it gets. I mean, they barely have to treat water in the Catskills. I mean, it's famously some of the best water quality in the country. They upgrade wastewater treatment plants. They have grant acquisition program. They provide tax relief to the municipalities. They have a septic replacement program, a reforestation program, and they've spent since 1997 $2.5 billion on these programs. And in 2025, a commitment of an additional $228 million. In the New Jersey Highlands region, there's no specific BMPs for forestry region, despite Highlands Council trying. There's no stewardship program. There's no open space acquisition funds. There's no viable TDR, transfer development rights program. There's no program for resource restoration, no cost share program for private landowners. And they have an annual budget of only $3 million. $228 million. And this has been unchanged since 2011. Municipal grant budget for conformance and other programs of the Highlands Council, $2.5 million, which has not changed since 2011. That's why Ben Spinelli can rightfully say it feels like I'm in the 8th year of Governor Christie.
What? If you're what?
Governor Christie,
Oh,
because Governor Murphy has done nothing to improve.
Is the Catskills watershed subject to the DEP control?
That's
not.
New York. That's New York. It's
Oh.
New York.
Well, the Catskills is New York, but they have, it's like the preservation area. There's a higher level of investment.
They're not subject to the DEP thing?
They're not. The Highlands Council is in but not of DEP. That's the way it should be. The DEC is in but not of the state DEP. But they don't allow that independence here in the Highlands. They do allow it in New York. Because they realize they're all working for the same end. And we don't have that understanding here. So the DEC in New York has 80 full-time staff members. This is just New York, this page. They have foresters, they have ecologists, they have agricultural specialists, economists, scientists, engineers, and planners. And they preserve more than 156,000 acres of open space for farming. And they have these initiatives that are ready to move forward, 35 million for agricultural management practices, 6 million for forestry practices, 3.5 million for a pure Catskills economic sustainability program, on and on and on. And in partnership with Columbia University to develop a climate action plan. I mean, we have that level of experience and academic knowledge here in New Jersey, but we don't use it for this purpose. So, how does New Jersey, in contrast, support the Highlands? They have 21 full-time staff members, 5 planners, 3 scientists, 3 GIS professionals, no foresters, no agricultural specialists, no climate scientists, 0 water resource engineers, 0 ecological restoration, land management professionals with an annual operating budget of $3 million and an additional $2.5 million in grants to municipalities.
and their funding comes from the corporate tax, like you mentioned.
No, this is,
Oh.
no, this is the state budget line. These are state budget.
Okay.
And of course, the Catskills is a source for New York City's water.
Yes, but roughly it's almost the same the number of water users. They have a $47 per acre watershed moratorium made for municipalities statewide, not universally applied to Highlands. The rate is stagnant in the Highlands. The rate has been stagnant since 1999. Actually predates the Highlands Act. There's no land preservation spending specifically for the Highlands. There's no stewardship or land management spending. And what's happening in the most mature forests of the Highlands, they're being destroyed by deer. They will eventually ecologically die unless we get it on the deer population. There's no viable transfer development rights program, although that was a requirement of the Highlands Act. And both operating and grant budgets cut in half in 2011 and have remained at that level ever since. Speaking about TDR program, there's been several suits early on to overturn the Highlands Act. Warren County actually sued the state, several landowners Nobody went over the fact that there's been no TDR program. They could probably win on that. They went for reasons that were easily dismissed by the courts. Well, so we're hoping with the new governor that we may be able to get some positive movement with an understanding of how important this region is to the rest of the state. But we see, I mean, the governor-elect has announced their transition teams. There is no environmental team. There's no regional planning. There's no planning team. And that we're very alarmed by that. But then again, most of the time, transition reports just end up as shelf trophies. And the reality of life in New Jersey seems to take over. So with that, any questions?
In terms of what Governor-elect Cheryl will do, we can't predict it, but from if the past was any prediction though,
When she was Congresswoman,
Congresswoman, yeah, I know.
she claimed, well, she was very supportive of the Highlands Conservation, which directly benefited the Highlands region. But she wasn't in the forefront. It wasn't environmental wasn't a banner cause of hers.
But she did sponsor, I think, 10 bills which were passed in part of the Infrastructure Act.
Yep.
That were dealt with water quality, water infrastructure, and two of them happened to deal with the Whitney River. So she, in that case,
There's some.
only in that case, I'm kind of hopeful about something.
Was she the prime sponsor?
He was the prime sponsor of that.
Very good. I wasn't aware. That's good to know.
Yeah, and well, we're thankful for the two Whitney River projects. I mean, one of them was completed, but the other were ongoing. But yeah, some of the towns involved, they owe us support on that part.
Are these the infrastructure like water treatment plants?
Some of them is like one is de-snagging of the Whitney River.
Mhm.
Some of them are dealing like with flooding issues and Sag River and Wayne. So it's even though I mean there are some of them are in her district, some that might be outside our district, but they're related to it. So there were like 10 stormwater management projects. I mean, all water related projects that and I mean these are of course rivers that their watersheds begin in the Highlands. And it's a shame that Christie had that issue that because his home is in the Highland region. And I mean, you would think he would have that foresight, but I guess he has other priorities for that. Which is something that we as a group and also I guess Great Swamp watershed are always emphasizing is the watershed is us. We have to be careful that the Highlands is us. Within the region, we're as much responsible for it as individuals, as counties, as municipalities. And I mean, we're trying to emphasize that as we go on.
Great. Well, one thing we're experiencing is that municipalities and counties were once stridently against the Highlands Act.
Yeah.
Are conforming now. Because they're seeing with their challenges with development, that with warehouses and potentially data centers, that they can maintain the physical character of their community, which they cherish and love, with the support of the Highlands Council. They're better off with the Highlands Council than not the Highlands Council. Because when you planning area that conforms, their Highlands land use ordinance becomes adopted, they now, their master plan now has the presumption of validity in court, which they don't have without it. And if they are sued, any of the land use ordinances that have to do with conformance, the state or the Highlands Council will pay for your legal defense. Which is pretty good,
I have a question.
yes.
I've heard that Harding Township had bought a 7-acre parcel of property way back when from the previous mayor, Lewis, I think his name was. And now they're proposing to build, I think it's 190 units on the corner of Kitchen.
Chadwick Road. And
No, that's another one, but this is, yeah, this is, they. Because I was at a Harding Township meeting. And of course, they were very pleased that this Mayor Lewis had the foresight to buy this.
oh, they bought it not as open space, but for use.
I'm not sure what it's listed.
They wouldn't be
as.
able to do that if they used 3 acres funding.
It was like, I don't know how long ago. But anyway, now they have to fulfill this round 4 obligation.
Mhm.
So they have proposed, and I don't know how, if it's been voted on or whatever. But they wanna put these units, right across the street from the Morris thing. But I guess they would have to get the sewer rates from Morris Township.
Right,
Now, in the meantime, there's a property owner on Spring Valley that wanted to have his property developed. But they struck it down because
and
there's,
he's suing.
yes, I think so, but I have only heard this like hearsay. But I don't know how it stands right now, but their reasoning was that it was protected by the Highlands.
Well, Harding Township is conforming. I don't know if they've yet, you're not considered truly conformed until you adopt the Highlands land use element. And it takes, there are some conformance, the conformance process can take a couple of years to do it, to go through it correctly. But there had been a shortcut, which is no longer available because it was abused. So if the Highlands Council had considered you conformed, if you had, if your petition to conform was accepted by the Highlands Council. But you're still very far away from adopting the Highlands land use element. That's when those ordinances apply. So you're considered conformed by the Highlands Council because your petition to conform was accepted by the Highlands Council. But you're not really conforming. So if that's all you have, you don't have the protections against incompatible development for the regional master plan until you adopt the Highlands land use element. And that takes some work to get there.
Can you summarize what the, like if you're a municipality and you choose conformance, how does that change what happens in your town? How does that change what happens with your approval process at the planning board and the board?
Well, I mean, that Kathy, that speaks why the shortcut doesn't work. And that was, let's say you've resolved to conform, your petition was accepted by the Highlands Council, but now you got 2 years of work until you get the protection. So the Highlands Council had adopted this procedure called the checklist ordinance. And that means right after your petition was accepted, you can adopt this ordinance that states that every development of more than 3 units would be dual. The application would go both to the Highlands Council and your planning board or the land use board. And the land use board would not deem the application complete for review until they got the determination of consistency with the regional master plan by the Highlands Council. So that you can do almost immediately. But what they found was, we saw this at Parsippany, that they adopted the checklist and the planning board knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
They were approving projects that were inconsistent. They weren't implementing the Highland, the regional master plan or the Highlands consistent ordinances with people who wanted to develop. And it was just like, and they'd say the application or the memorandum of approval would just say, you know, we approve it, but they can't develop subject to getting all their state permits. So the whole conformance was seen as just another state permit from DEP. They weren't taking ownership of it. They didn't understand it.
How does that process work in towns where the conformance is actually function? Does somebody educate the planning board
Yeah,
on, hello, you guys, you've got
Is it
to.
a binding requirement from the Highlands Council?
yes.
Okay.
However, I mean, a municipality is free at any time to back out. Cause
That's
it's,
the whole thing.
yeah,
Okay.
but
Not
if they're
always.
land on, right, I mean, they just adopt a resolution that they're no longer going to conform. But until that time, the Highlands consistent ordinances, which are all in the Highlands land use element of your master plan and your land use ordinances apply. And that's what the planning board or the zoning board of adjustment would be implementing.
Is Morris Township?
I know we're not,
We're not.
that I know of. It's
We're not.
been, I've been advocating for that for years.
We haven't been on the, we haven't, still not a member of the coalition.
We can talk offline.
Yeah.
This is something that should happen. I feel really, that's part of why I'm here. It's quite frustrating to me that Morris Township is
No,
is not, from what I can tell, even made a baby step. toward-
Well, what I find, and this is no justification, is that most municipal governing bodies are so overwhelmed
Yes,
by all this other stuff. Now with, you know, affordable housing mandates and this and that, and they don't have,
there's
it's
that,
always
and there's
the Highlands
also
Council.
confusing, and
Yeah.
it's hard to understand.
Would you see an interest shown, do you see an interest shown from planning boards? Because it seems like the master plan and the planning board master plan really falls under the auspices of the planning board.
You're absolutely right. When the Highlands Council gives a presentation to a municipality, it's to the governing body, it's not to the planning board.
Because it seems like it would be good if the desire to join came from the planning board. Right, do you see that happening in other places?
Not really. I think that's an excellent idea.
It is.
You know, maybe when the Highlands Council comes, it's a joint meeting between the planning board and the governing body.
And when you do your master plan review, it's a great time to bring it up. I know. It's a great time to bring it up. And for with members of the environmental commission, for example,
Yeah.
to show up at the master plan review and speak to it.
As far as the last 14 years or so it's been in place, or I don't know, 12 years maybe. What's the impact on water quality?
Well, that's the thing. We don't, that has not been measured. And we think in the planning area a little, maybe. In the preservation area, it hasn't restored water quality. It's prevented it from degrading further.
Sure.
Just because of the land use constraints. But we have no data that shows, let's say, comparing a conformed municipalities in the planning area with another municipality just outside the Highlands. See what the economic difference has been, see what the water quality differences have been. Or within watersheds that have those different
I
qualities.
mean, I'll say this, I run Morris County MUA, you know, we provide water Morris County, that area. And I don't think I've noticed a difference in any of our water activity or aquifer levels, and it's all aquifer.
Right.
Before or after the act, Now we have PFAS coming up, which is, I don't know if that would have prevented it or not. But it hasn't gotten worse, like you were saying. I mean, while it's been limited and we can't get more water, right from a regulatory standpoint, at least the quality and the quantity seems consistent.
Right.
Hydrogeologically, in our area, 20 years.
Well, the Highlands Council has a much stricter or more conservative process for determining, that their net water availability, which is much more stricter than typical water utility determining how much water they have. And I wonder if that's been compared. Because Highlands water deficit, which is a very conservative measure, very much restricts development.
Oh, and they have restricted our development of additional water resources over the last 12 years.
Yeah.
It's been very difficult to deal with. I guess that's the intent of it.
Right.
But and trying to and work in the world of affordable housing and trying to find water for people that
Where there's the
can't
collision,
get.
like you were
It's
talking
difficult.
about.
Yeah. We really don't know how much water is in an aquifer. We do know how much we're drawing from it and how much is getting back. And the Highlands Council method is just much stricter.
I have one other question. Were you going back to the topic of the Cheryl administration? Did I understand you correctly? You're saying that her transition team includes no environmental or her administrative, what, can you clarify that point?
Yeah, there is no, she has these focused teams. A lot have to do with energy, a lot have to do with affordability, transparency in government, but nothing called environmental, or even relating to environment.
So it's that you're talking about the transition planning. Right?
Well, I think the planning teams are they're gonna be writing the recommendations to the governor.
Wow, I'm surprised by that. I didn't know that.
And kind of like you're saying that shows that it's not a priority.
That's what it
These
suggests.
transition teams would set her priorities.
Yes, she did name a panel of people who can, I forget what it's called, but they're free to suggest in anything. And there's some, I wouldn't say real strong, but there's some good environmental minds on that. I forget what that team is called.
Like the miscellaneous.
So,
It does seem like reasonable to expect her to fill in some of the membership on the Highlands Council. And that's really concrete.
But what do you think Murphy would have done?
You would,
he promised us that he would.
did he overtly?
Yes, twice. When he was a candidate, I met him. And we spoke at a diner for an hour and a half. And then his campaign manager at the time was Matt Platkin. And he would not make an appointment until he's discussed it with us first. And he also came to our policy committee once he was governor, or no, still governor, still candidate Murphy, and made that promise.
What do you think? Do you think it's just that it's not a priority, or they got too many other things to do, or?
It's hard to say. His first group of advisors in the governor's office were looked as inexperienced. And he was getting bad advice. But overall, with the second term, I would say it's not a priority. Yes.
Can I just ask a question about the transfer development rights.
Mhm.
And I came in late, so I may have missed a more in-depth discussion of it, but what is that?
Well, let me talk about where it does, what transfer of development rights is generally where, there would be land that is intended to be by, planning, protected and preserved, in order to develop in an area where you want to grow. You have to buy development rights from the people who land you want to protect. And in order to develop in a growth area, you have to own a certain, you have to exchange some of these development rights there. So it's really a transfer of development from one area, taking it away, purchasing those development rights and executing it where you want development to occur. And those rights cost money. You buy some development rights, which ends up protecting the land you want to protect. And you execute those rights where it is agreed to develop. Now, when the Highlands Act was passed, there were mandatory receiving zones for those development rights. So the towns that wanted to grow became the receiving, but it was written into the act that these would be growth areas. And the areas we want to protect, that's where you had to purchase these development rights. And it turned into a marketplace where if you could purchase rights, you didn't have to be a developer, you just wanted to invest, and you can sell them to a developer, and they assumed a value, a trading value. When the Highlands Act was passed, there was going to be a TDR program, but there would be no mandatory growth areas. And there would be voluntary growth areas, and any Highlands municipality could become a voluntary growth area if they chose to be, but none chose to be. So they expanded it by legislation that the growth areas can include any Highlands county, even outside of the Highlands, like the parts of Warren County that are outside of the Highlands, Sussex County that are outside of the Highlands. Still no takers to become voluntary receiving areas. Then they decided that any municipality in the state of New Jersey could become a receiving zone for Highlands development credits. None, zero, still today. A lot of the Highlands Council offered funding for municipalities that wanted to explore the option to do a cost benefit analysis or whatever. A lot of municipalities took that money, did a study, decided they didn't want to do it. So we still have none. So the Highlands Transfer Development Program never took off.
Is it because the program was never defined well, or no one just trusted that it would be legitimate and a worthy investment?
It could be a combination of all those things. I mean, it works in the Highlands. Those Highlands development credits are worth money. Yeah, Highlands Development Bank, they determine the value and they buy credits, they sell credits. It works, but that's because they have mandatory growth areas. And the Highlands Act says, that the Highlands Act can only be effective once it has a TDR program in place. It's working. Or required that to happen. And there's a TDR bank, but they don't buy or sell anything. They were using Highlands Conservation Act funding to buy development rights. And they just hold on to development rights, never went anywhere. So it's sort of an artificial injection, but that's not the way it's sustained.
I don't think I understand what a development right is, like, does
So
it mean somebody buys the right to develop something? Like, does a town, like, let's say, a town that's not in the Highlands Council, I don't think I get how it would work, like, somebody would have to buy the right to.
Well, if you designate an area that you want to protect, And in order to, and you designate an area where you want those development rights to be transferred to. So the area you want to protect, your land has a certain value of which is your development rights. If anyone wants to build here in that growth area, they have to purchase development rights from the area you want to protect. So the homeowner, the property owner, gets that money. And just for as a consequence of being identified as a protection area. So all of the Highlands preservation area, if there was a growth area, it would have been required that you bought those development rights before you can grow elsewhere, before you can build elsewhere.
So you'd have to set us, if you're in the receiving town, you would actually designate this
Yep.
area is a receiving zone for
Yep.
those transfers. So it's like a specific place
Yep, yeah,
within a town gets designated to be the receiving
And
side.
ideally, that marketplace is competitive and someone's like, ooh, should I sell my development right now? They're hot, let me sell it now, it's time to do it, or
right, and anyone can buy them, you don't have to be a developer. You
you could be a speculator.
be a speculator.
So without any places designated outside to transfer them to, does that mean that
They have no.
no one has lost their right to develop in
No.
the Highlands? Okay.
No.
So how does
Well,
that
well, I
work?
mean, the regulation has severely constrained their right to develop.
Yeah,
So this is why it's seen as an equity provision. That now you can get some money, because in order to develop somewhere else, someone had to pay for your, pay you for your constrained development opportunities.
but it's already constrained, so have they lost money?
Well, they get some of it back through this program,
But they're not getting it back because it hasn't been set up.
correct?
So they've just, anybody who's lives in the Highlands then
In the preservation area,
in the preservation area.
they've lost their, well, if they had development value, I mean, small lot without,
Yeah.
or something without access, could have very low development value, but, you know, a 150 acre farm, there probably has a lot of development rights. And, you know, there have been intermunicipal transfer development programs. There was one in, Mercer, but, maybe it was Mercer County, which they enacted a TDR program where they specified an area of the municipality you want to develop, the constrained development, but in order to develop in an area they identified as a growth area, you had to purchase development rights from there and transfer them to here. That's why it's called a transfer development program.
In,
Mine should be quick. Of the towns in the Highlands region that are in the planning area, how many of those towns are there? And of those, how many have chosen conformity?
I have to look at the map, but of all the Highlands, of the 88 municipalities in the Highlands, I think there are 5 towns that are entirely in the preservation area. There are,
Only 5.
yeah, there are 47 towns entirely in the planning area, like Morristown.
Yeah.
There are 52 towns with lands, some in the preservation area and some in the planning area, are split. Some very little preservation area, lots of planning area, some very little planning area, a lot of preservation.
But of the ones in the planning area, only the 47. Aren't there just a handful that are? have
Well,
chosen?
no, Parsippany, for one, High Bridge, White, there are towns in. There were, I don't remember offhand, but every Highlands Council meeting now, there are 3 or 4 towns that are conforming.
So when a town is in process, like Mendham, for example.
Right.
They come before the Highlands Council and theoretically the public shows up and shares comments. Or-
Yeah, yeah. Because to accept their resolution to conform, their petition to conform, that's what it's called. It's a resolution of the Highlands Council and their public comments
Ah,
before they vote. Very, very rarely does someone come to oppose conformists.
yeah.
I was gonna ask, in an ideal world, if you were like a governor without a legislature,
Ideal from there.
would you be able to marry the affordable housing requirements with the Highlands, like need to develop TDRs and somehow get one to develop, that's such a valuable thing, all the affordable housing. And it's like if you could get that to pull or get the money to people in the Highlands. Would that work?
I mean, it would help if the housing advocates were pro Highlands, and they're generally not.
They would
But
what?
that would take good leadership, that would take leadership by the government. What, Kathy?
I didn't hear, it would help if the housing advocates were.
Were interested in the Highlands. Or usually they're trying to shove more housing in the Highlands than could be sustained. I mean, the Highlands, in the act, the Highlands Council was to determine how much development the Highlands area region could sustain before the water resources were degraded. And the Highlands Council has that expertise. No one else does. And the amount of housing, and a lot of it has to do with, the fact that most of the affordable housing today is made possible through inclusionary development, where you have to develop, 80% market rate in order to get just 20% affordable. And, counterintuitively, that ends up increasing the cost of housing, because the affordables you build, that cost has to get spread somewhere, so it goes into the cost of the market rate.
It's very complicated.
Very complicated. And somehow there has to be a better way.
Your does. You should highlight with this group, I don't know if people have seen it. I think this is an excellent op-ed.
Well, then you should,
I told Elliot, I think this should be a required reading for everyone, all the legislators.
Is that new?
No, I
About
did
6 weeks old, 2 months old.
October 12th. It's called Affordable Housing or a Toxin-Free Environment Shouldn't Have to Be a Choice.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the key issue.
they shouldn't be in competition with each other. Leadership, the governor should say these are both extremely
They
important.
are.
How do we balance them?
That's the issue.
And that's not going on.
I know it's not. And that's the tragedy of what's going on, I think.
Well, when I meet with Troy Singleton, he's gonna hear exactly that.
I'll give you one little hint. I met with Troy Singleton totally by chance one time at a history conference. He's a history buff. And the sort of connection we had was, this particular conference, ironically enough, it took place at a prison, okay? And the topic that he spoke to that night was on people's stories, and he seems to have a passion for stories of individual people. And that resonated with me, and I went up to him afterwards and I connected with him on that, but I think as far as actually persuading him to like listen and maybe do something, I got the impression that was a kind of a door to
So we have to organize a moth story. The collision of affordable housing.
There you go.
Yeah.
a story of somebody really suffering, some town, some person, on the environment to illustrate your point. I know it's a
Well,
far-fetched.
no one's died yet because,
I know.
but there's been a lot of anxiety, frustration, and economic losers and gains.
It's a huge challenge.
Just quickly, could you give me a little synopsis of what the coalition is, who works there, how many people?
Well, we have 6 full-time staff,
Mhm.
which is really small. And we have an executive director, which is Julia Summers.
Mhm.
And what was I thinking? Something related to here, but I forget what it was. Someone was talking about, Harding Township.
Mhm.
She's a resident of Harding Township. She is on their open space committee. She's a board member of the Harding Land Trust. So she's fortunately, very active in Harding Township. We have a development director, we have a policy communications director, we have an outreach and education director. We're all directors. Actually, we should just call ourselves vice president.
Where do you get your funding from?
Foundations and personal contributions.
So you're a nonprofit.
Yeah, we're a nonprofit. And,
We're members,
yeah.
we're annual,
We're-
WRWAC, we are members of the.
We have a much louder voice than our small staff would suggest, because are a true coalition of organizations. And some of the larger members, like New Jersey Conservation Foundation, the Land Conservancy of New Jersey, the Watershed Institute, they provide us with their resources and their attention. That helps. So we join our voices in advocacy, and that makes us much louder, more amplified.
But what you do is help grassroots groups.
That's one of the things.
We called on Julia in Ruga Township. Citizens were upset about the odor coming from the new pot farm,
Right.
right? So she helped us kind of just organize a little better and gave us some advice about how to deal with that. So, and I know you've had some great triumphs
We stopped
around the state.
in the town of Frelinghuysen. They had a proposal to build a cannabis grow facility. And, we don't oppose cannabis facilities because it's legal in New Jersey. But this was going to take a working, productive farm in a magnificent farm landscape and transform it into a industrial, high water consuming industrial facility, really, with 24-hour security. It would have detracted from the scenic resource values, a loss of another farm, because a regulated cannabis grow facility does not get the protection of the Right to Farm Act.
Are they
SADC,
indoors?
Hmm?
Are they indoors?
they're indoors. So it's not really a farm, it's even more.
That's what we have down the road, but
Yes.
they wanted to expand and the river's back there and a water supply for boat and everything. And there was a lot of concerns, but just saying and we're actually gonna call on you again from Ruga Township because we're having
The
a
ordinance?
solar ordinance, yes.
Yeah,
I'm very involved in that, I'll talk to you afterward about
yeah,
that, but-
because, I believe a municipality to some degree should be able to say where solar is okay, but not. I think this is too much. We need solar, but we can't exempt solar from all municipal review. I think there has to be some midpoint. I don't know what it is yet.
Balance is always the challenge.
Yes, what's the most reasonable? So. Thank you for.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
That was great.
Thank you.
Small, but intimate, well-informed.
Small but mighty.
And it's recorded.